You have come a long way since you first entered primary fixed-wing flight training. And by this time, you've become accustomed to flying the L19. Now you are ready for your first solo night flight, and your mind is filled with several dozen new and assorted facts. There is one basic fact, however, that will help keep your thinking clear. The one big difference between night flying and day flying is that your visibility is limited at night. Everything else is basically the same. Because vision is limited at night, checking your lights is exceedingly important. In your pre-flight inspection, see that the lamps are operating properly, that the glass covers are not cracked and are securely in place. Check your landing light. Move far enough forward of the aircraft to be sure that both lamps are lit. The last external light to be checked is the anti-collision light or rotating beacon, which must be lit and rotating. Next, make sure that the fluorescent instrument lights and all of the other internal lights are in working order. The final, and in an emergency the most important light, is your own flashlight. Another check before a night flight is for windshield cleanliness. A haze of oil or dust will impair your vision much more at night than it will in the daytime.
Hey, what kind of night flight is this? It's broad daylight.
You're right, Bird Dog. Night orientation flights start at official sunset. That way it gets dark gradually while you're flying.
Oh, sort of gives you a chance to go from something you know to something you don't know, huh?
That's right.
Pretty good idea. Okay, you can go on now.
Well, thanks. Taxi accidents are just as inexcusable at dusk or at night as they are in the daytime. To safeguard against others not seeing you, turn your navigation lights to flashing before starting your engine. At night, judgment of distance is difficult, and the safe way is to proceed very slowly. Give yourself plenty of clearance around aircraft or any other obstacle, and above all, keep your plane under control. Before we get to the runway, let's take a moment to learn about the lights used on the airfield. The perimeter of the ramp will be lit with blue lights, and the active taxiways will be similarly marked with blue lights. The runway itself is bordered with white lights, and there is a line of green threshold lights at the approach end of the runway. Only the active runway will be lit. The parallel runway is lit only when there is an emergency landing in progress. All these lights serve merely as a guide. They are not intended to illuminate the area. Another group of guide lights are the red obstruction lights on tall objects around the airfield. Everything that projects considerably above the terrain, such as buildings, towers, and poles, should have an obstruction light. The wind T is illuminated to indicate any crosswind. The final important light is your own landing light. On very dark nights, you may have to use it while taxiing. Flash it on and off quickly to reveal any obstruction without killing your night vision. And here's an important don't. Don't ever turn on your landing light when there is any possibility it may shine directly into another pilot's eyes. Suppose this pilot were just applying throttle for takeoff as you turned on your landing light. He'd be blind for the next few moments. Use your light only if necessary. You'll preserve your own and the other pilot's night vision. When you're parked at night, keep your engine RPM high enough so that your generator is cut in. Lights and radio transmissions will quickly run down a battery. For this reason, do not turn on your high-intensity beacon until you are in number 1 position. At the same time, turn your navigation lights to steady. The radio should not be cluttered with unnecessary calls at any time, especially at night. When you're cleared to take the runway, Check before making the decision to move out. Takeoffs at night are in some ways easier than during the day. Usually surface winds are more gentle, and there is seldom any problem of turbulence. With calm air and runway lights to guide you, the takeoff is relatively easy. Simply squeeze on power and accelerate. Hold a course straight down the runway as you would during the day. As you leave the lighted runway, everything outside your cockpit will seem very dark. When all orienting landmarks disappear, you may become momentarily disoriented.
Just like as if your headlights went off on your car on a dark road.
Not quite that bad, Bird Dog. You're not going to run into anything up here. To avoid or overcome this sensation, anticipate it. Then it won't surprise you. Glance at your instruments to be sure that you're holding your heading and pitch attitude. But most important, make a conscious effort to orient yourself. Locate the horizon. Look for lights you know are there, such as the lights of a nearby town. By the time you level off, you'll be over the where am I feeling. To improve your outside vision, keep your interior lights no brighter than they have to be. On a night flight, you will find that the most obvious light on other aircraft is the anti-collision light. On the L19, this light is beneath the fuselage. On most other aircraft, it is at the top of the vertical stabilizer. It can be seen for many miles. As it approaches, it will normally appear to move across your windshield. If it draws closer but does not move to right or left, you may be on a collision course and you should alter your course. On your first night checkout, your instructor familiarized you with methods of determining the course of other aircraft. He showed you methods by which you can orient yourself, and he gave you help in learning to judge altitude and distance at night.
Narrator, I gotta tell these guys something which breaks my heart to say.
What's that, Bird Dog?
If I should, well, conk out on you at night, you'd better just head me to a place where nobody lives and bid me a fond farewell. Bail out.
That's right, Bird Dog. Unless there's a lighted strip where you positively know you can make it, bail out.
Okay, that's enough of that. Let's give them the know-how on night landings.
The rotating beacon can be seen for many miles, and it will become a welcome sight when you're returning from your first solo night cross-country flight.
You're so right.
Perfecting your night landing technique isn't as difficult as it might seem. When you're entering the pattern, be sure that you know where other traffic in the pattern is. Their most obvious feature is the glow from their navigation and anti-collision lights. Space yourself properly. Only experience will teach you to determine another plane's distance and heading. The first few times out, be cautious, but try to learn. As you enter the downwind leg, make your usual cockpit check and proceed just as you would in the daytime. Glide and flap setting are the same as usual. But here is a special tip for night landings. Since you can't see everything that's going on at night, be particularly alert for a go-around signal from runway control. If a go-around should be necessary, follow a course parallel to the runway, the same course that you use in the daytime. Be particularly wary of steep turns at low altitude. You don't have all the reference points you've been unconsciously using in the daytime. Make your turn to final by sighting on the runway lights and threshold lights to judge your position and angle of glide. The lights can give you a sight picture at night, just as you use a feature of the runway in the daytime. At night, it is not unusual for the wind to drop in velocity or change direction as you glide through the 200 to 300 foot level.
That's why you'll see some guys come screaming in at night faster than a saber jet.
Right. Learn to sense a wind change. If you're going to use the landing light, snap it on while on final, well before your roundout. The light will dazzle your eyes momentarily and you will need time to recover full vision before you start your roundout. Just before you start your roundout, add a little throttle. This will help prevent a hard landing if you round out too high. Use the runway lights as a reference for roundout. As you touch down, bring your stick full back and keep the nose of the aircraft right on the white line as you roll out. Then clear the runway quickly but safely.
And when you're parked on the ramp, call the tower and tell them you're home. You don't want the whole darn base out looking for you while you're snug in the sack.
Ready to review, Bird Dog?
No review today.
No review? How come?
I'm going to give a safety lecture.
Oh, giving lectures now, are you?
Yup, mandatory. Everybody sign in. Flying safety starts with a good pre-flight. That goes double at night. You can't set a tired airplane down in a cornfield at night. Next is something you can't see. It's the prop wash. Burbly air. From this guy who just took off. If you land right behind him, watch out for it. Prop wash hangs around for a long time at night because the air is calm, like the narrator said. Watch out for props on the ramp, too. Lots of guys say, "Who, me?" when they hear that. Couple of those guys walk into spinning props every year. Now, the biggest difference in night flying is that it's dark outside. That you can't do nothing about. One thing you can do is keep it dark inside. You'll be surprised how light it gets outside if it ain't too light inside. Another thing, you ain't no airline's captain. You gotta keep your head out of the cockpit. Nobody else is gonna do the looking for you. And monitor your radio. If they're telling you to go around, and you happen to be listening to rock and roll, you're likely to be listening to harp solos on Cloud 9 next thing you know. The last thing I'm going to say is, don't fumble for switches. Get to know where everything is. Get cockpit time.
That was great, Bird Dog, but there's one more thing I thought you'd mention.
Yeah? What?
Bright lights like this. Stare at it, Bird Dog. Now look around. Can you see anything in the classroom?
You made your point. Don't look directly at bright lights. They'll louse up your night vision.
The principles and techniques shown in this film and other films in this series enable you as a future Army aviator to perform any mission assigned with better understanding and safety.